Ward. Okay. So yes. So welcome to the Spiders of Kentucky class. So let's get started. All right. So to begin, let's first talk about what exactly is a spider, because even though spiders get lumped quite a bit in with insects, and of course, when we talk about our entomology classes, we definitely focus on insects. But spiders are actually not a true insect. As most of us know, they are arachnids. And with that class of animals, those include things like scorpions, mites, ticks, and daddy long legs. And kind of one of the distinguishing characteristics of spiders is they have 8 legs as opposed to 6 legs, which are common with insects. And then in addition to, kind of their body does differ a little bit from an insect body anyway. So if you can remember in your biology class, insects have 3 body parts. Usually they have the head, the thorax, and the abdomen. Okay. Now with spiders, they only have 2 body parts. They have kind of the cephalothorax, and then their abdomen itself. So that kind of is what helps to kind of distinguish it from actual true insects. Now, something else that spiders have is they kind of have these appendages that appear like fangs, these kind of fang-like mouth parts. It's called chelicerae. Okay, but just so I don't have to stumble on that this whole class, I'm just going to call them fangs, even though they're not like a true fang that we think on, you know, um, like dogs or wolves or something like that. So, but that is kind of one of their mouth parts. And then the life cycle of a spider is kind of more of an incomplete or simplified metamorphosis compared to things like, say, butterflies, which usually have the egg, caterpillar, chrysalis, and then adult. Spiders instead have the egg, the spiderling, and then the adult. And so what happens with spiderlings is they will molt like kind of some of these other animals. They're going to shed their exoskeleton multiple times as they develop, and then they'll slowly get bigger and bigger and bigger till they reach maturity. So that's kind of like a generalized, you know, definition of what a spider is, and we'll get a little bit more into the life cycle with the different spiders that we talk about too. So I've got quite a few spiders to talk about today. And of course, probably the ones you want to know about most, kind of our venomous ones, like our black widow and brown recluses, I'm going to leave till the very end. So y'all are just going to have to hang out until I get to those. So let's talk about some of these other spiders that we might see, both in our houses or if we're just even taking a woods in Kentucky. What are some of these spiders that we're going to find? So the first one that I'm going to talk about is the cellar spiders. This is going to be a very common one that you see probably in your house. I know, for instance, I typically see cellar spiders in my house, in my bathroom, kind of in the upper corner of my bathroom, just kind of hanging out. And these spiders have very long, skinny legs. And oftentimes we call them daddy long legs when really they're not the actual true daddy long leg that we see, like, say, in the woods. But a lot of people kind of will give them that nickname, if you will. But it is called a cellar spider. So they have very long, skinny legs and very small bodies. A lot of times their coloration is going to be tan or more of a gray color to them. Oftentimes, whenever we classify spiders or kind of help to distinguish between types of spiders, we look at their webs. And so in the case of cellar spiders, they have more of a messy web. it's not really well structured at all. And a lot of times it's usually found in more shaded, darker corners of your home or a barn or garage or somewhere like that. Now, when it comes to things like, because we see this kind of differ between spiders, is how the female spiders lay their eggs, what they do with their eggs. So we'll kind of talk about how some spiders will actually carry egg sacs on their bodies until they hatch, or others will actually create more of an egg sac and put it on their web. So with the case of cellar spiders, the females are only going to lay a few dozen eggs and they're going to wrap them up in webbing for protection. So you'll kind of see that this kind of changes depending on the type of spider. Now, what are some of the things that you're going to see cellar spiders eat? Sometimes, that's one thing we're going to talk about, is that spiders can be quite beneficial. Most spiders, if not all, really are beneficial for kind of eating some of those pesky bugs that we may not like too much. Okay, they serve a purpose in the ecosystem and on that food chain. So they're very important in that regard. And so with cellar spiders, a lot of times, especially if they're in your house, you're going to see them feed on flies, gnats, mosquitoes, and moths. And so I know typically a lot of people have arachnophobia. Of course, a lot of this is due to our culture, due to kind of horror books and horror movies. But truly, most of the spiders we're going to talk about today are not harmful. They're not going to impact you in a negative way. And so that's something that we need to think about, is to reduce that stigma, right? Reduce that stigma that spiders are bad and they're icky, when actually they are very beneficial creatures. And honestly, it may not hurt to have a spider or two in your house, because they might eat up some of those other little pests that are around that you may not want. So, just something that I really want to mention, especially as we talk about this whole class with spiders. So kind of going in that direction here, are these harmful? No, definitely not. Cellar spiders are not known to bite people at all. Even if there was any kind of indication of a bite, it's not anything that's going to be harmful. And typically they don't bother people. A lot of times, if you get close to them, they kind of might try to, go off a little bit. And so they may try to run away. So, again, if it's in a corner of your home, it's not bothering anybody, then it's fine. They need a home too. So another spider we'll talk about are what we call cobweb spiders. So they look a little bit different. And a lot of times we are going to see these more outside of our homes versus inside of our homes. I mean, although it is possible for them to be inside our homes, I actually have a little guy that hangs out in my kitchen. And I just kind of watch him because he's just, I don't know. I know this sounds strange, but I think they're kind of cute. So like he's just this cute, tiny little spider. But anyway, these cobweb spiders usually are more messy and disorganized when it comes to their webs. And this illustration here kind of showcases that. Again, it's a little less structured, especially when we next look into the orb weaver spiders, which really create some really well-defined webs. How you can tell if it's a cobweb spider is it's going to have a more rounder spherical abdomen, and they're going to be a little bit kind of larger. So you're going to notice them more than some of the other spiders that we're going to talk about. Most of the time, they're going to be found just about anywhere outside in our landscapes. Usually you'll see them on some of our structures, like our walls or fences, but they can be up in the trees as well. They are going to eat about anything that can be trapped in their webs. So that could be anything like flies or mosquitoes, anything of that nature. Now, with spiders, their vision is going to depend on the type of spider. Some spiders have better vision than others. And so with cobweb spiders, they don't have great vision, okay? Not well at all. And so they rely on prey getting caught in their webs. And when the prey gets caught in their webs, you'll kind of notice this with other spiders as well, is they can kind of feel those vibrations. They can feel when a prey gets trapped in the web, and then they'll go after it. So that's kind of what a cobweb spider is doing. Now, some of the more kind of hunter spiders we'll talk about actually do have great vision and are able to see a little bit easier. And kind of talking about vision, let me mention that many spiders, I'll say this, many spiders traditionally have 8 eyes. So we kind of think 8 legs and 8 eyes. Now, that's not the case for all of them. There's some that may only have 2, 4, or 6 eyes, and we'll kind of distinguish some of the ones that don't have those 8 eyes. But just kind of know, even though for the most part, many spiders have 8 eyes, it's not all around the same for everyone. Now, with cobweb spiders, they have a variety of little color patterns, and you can kind of see some of that modeling that's on on their abdomen. When it comes to life cycles, most spiders are going to live less than a year. So they are going to not have a life cycle that's beyond a year. Sometimes it may only be a few months. Now with cobwebs, that's kind of what we're looking at. But there are spider species that will go even up to 2 to 4 years of living. So it just kind of, again, depends on the type of spider. Orb weavers. So of course, these are kind of a fan favorite, right? When people see kind of the beautiful designed webs and kind of the brilliant colors, they think of orb weavers. And so that's a type of spider we see a little more appreciation for. And so orb weavers, they're a very diverse group, okay? The webs are very organized. They resemble an actual grid. And they will, again, really kind of almost, how's the best way to explain it? It's just very structural and well defined compared to other spiders. So a lot of times when we see these webs, usually, again, it is outside. These don't tend to wander inside. They're going to be more found on structures, trees, fences, walls. I have an orb weaver in my front yard right now. It's kind of over by my front windowsill that has a beautiful web going on. And sometimes you have to watch because you may not realize there's a web there until you accidentally run into it. I know I tended to do that before, so kind of be mindful of your surroundings because I've had some build them on like my deck and then I run right into it. So just kind of watch that. When it comes to reproduction, the female orb weavers are going to wrap the eggs in a protective case, kind of like the cellar spiders and kind of these little silken egg cases that you'll see. They are going to eat just about any kind of insect, mosquitoes, ants, flies, whatever is going to get trapped, of course, in their web. Now, with orb weavers, if you leave them alone, they're going to leave you alone, okay? Now, if for some reason you are physically handling one, which, you don't really want to be physically handling any kind of spider, you may want to, if you need to collect them or move them, maybe use some kind of container. But if you were physically handling an orb weaver, potentially it could bite. That bite could be slightly painful, but it's not considered dangerous. And that's something that we'll mention, that even for the spiders that bite, unless you have horrible allergies, like you are known to have a pretty severe allergic reaction to spider bites, you know, then of course those individuals need to be cautious and seek medical attention. But for anyone who does not have that kind of allergy, it's really not going to be anything to be worried about. Okay, so just kind of know that. Orb weavers, they come in many kinds of colors, patterns, and shapes. They may have more of a spherical to oval to almost like this pentagon type abdomen to them. So there's so many different varieties that are out there. And one that I'll mention real quick is there is an orb weaver um, that's called the long-jawed orb weaver. And that's those fangs, those fang-like appendages that I had mentioned. On this one, it's extremely long, and sometimes they could even be longer than the actual like head thorax region. So they're pretty cool and substantial, especially if you can see them up close. Um, Even with these fangs, rarely are they ever going to bite. Um, a lot of times they're just kind of wandering and they're this kind of long and skinny structure, although there are some that are kind of small and round too. Let's talk about sheet weaving spiders. These are itty bitty spiders, itty bitty, to the point where you may not even know that they're around, honestly. And these are kind of more common and kind of more of our ag lands. As well. But these are small spiders. These do have 8 eyes. A lot of times they're going to construct webs that are on or very close to the ground. They may construct these webs in trees using leaves or even needles to help support that web. They're very abundant, but again, because they're so small, they're going to go pretty well unnoticed. Their webs are kind of these tangled networks of threads. And depending on the type of sheet weaving spider, it might be more of a kind of mass or kind of almost like a 2D sheet, like paper sheet, if you will. These will not use sticky silk in their webs. And what I mean by sticky silk is that is a common silk that's used to entangle prey that gets prey stuck in other spiders' webs. And so that's not the case with this spider. So instead of relying on that sticky silk to get all those prey stuck in the web, they are going to ensnare the prey by tangling it up in the web. So it's just going to get tangled up and not be able to get out. Generally, the males are going to be smaller and more slender than the females, and we do see this sometimes with other species where the females tend to be, you know, a little bit larger than the males. Um, when they reproduce and the females lay the eggs, they're going to lay them in silken sacks on the webs or even sometimes in the leaf litter that's on the ground. Again, you're going to see this in a lot of our ag fields, a lot of our crop areas. And they can be very beneficial because they are going to eat what we consider pests on some of our ag crops. Things like aphids and leafhoppers can be a problem on some of our different food crops. And so this type of spider, as little as it is, makes a difference with kind of eating up those insects. But they can also eat other things like flies, other spiders, and tiny wasps as well. With sheet weaving spiders, most of the time they're building their nests at night. They're really not known to bite people. Again, most people just don't really see them around. And I mean, more than likely, you may not even get caught up in a nest either. Purse web spiders. So we have a lot of fun names for these different types of spiders, right? I know everyone sees this picture and they're like instantly like a little intimidated. It's like, oh, this is like one of the kind of creepier looking ones. But, again, kind of change your mindset a little bit because these are very cool, unique individuals. So this is more of a medium size, slightly bigger spider. Generally, they're dark colored. Um, and they have more of those oversized fangs that we had talked about. So um, they kind of are lower in their stance and have more sprawling legs. And most of the time, they're going to feed on things like other insects or smaller spiders. So what's interesting about them versus other spiders is they use what's called silk tubes, these little compact silk tubes, and they're going to hide inside of this little tube. So it's not like a typical spider web per se. What happens is the prey is going to land on the outside of the tube. The spider's going to notice this, notice the prey landing on the tube, and it's going to actually bite through its own silk and then pull that prey inside of the tube. So it's a pretty cool, unique feature of how it is able to feast on its prey. Most of the time, these are rarely going to be encountered. Again, this is something we're going to see kind of more in our woodland areas. Maybe you might run into it on trails or near roadways, but it is really not considered dangerous. It could bite if you're handling it, but it's not dangerous. If somebody does see that, again, just because of the size, they get a little intimidated. Um, this is our closest relative to tarantulas in Kentucky, but it is not a tarantula. Let me say that. It's not a tarantula, but it is more closely related to tarantulas compared to other spiders that are found here. Just some other, interesting things. In order to reproduce, the male spider will typically wander long distances to find a female to mate with, which is not the case for a lot of spiders. A lot of times spiders will kind of try to stay within their little niche, their little area, for their whole life. Orchard spiders. So this is one again that we kind of see more outside and even in some of our crop fields. These are related to orb weavers, these orchard spiders. A lot of times they're very colorful, they're very vibrant, more kind of lighter colors like a bright green, white, or yellow with different markings. So you can kind of see that close up with this spider. It's kind of got these yellow and black, almost like stripings on it. You're going to see these in yards and woods and some of our crops like our corn and soybeans. And the webs for them are typically found just a few feet off the ground. So, I mean, truly, again, like unless you're actually out in the field or out in the woods, you're probably never going to come across these. They're not going to be a spider that typically wanders. Funnel weavers and grass spiders. So grass spider is technically a type of funnel weaver. So let's kind of talk about these. A lot of times funnel weavers get mistaken for wolf spiders based on their appearance, but they are not a wolf spider. And how you can tell the difference is again with the webs. So funnel weavers will actually build webs unlike wolf spiders. Wolf spiders do not build webs, okay? So that's when it's like, if you see this spider like outside in a web, it's not a wolf spider, okay? These are kind of more of a lighter coloration, but I can definitely see how with the markings and the gray and the black that you see on its body, it could get easily mistaken for a wolf spider, okay? Um, their legs are a little bit more bristly. These do have 8 eyes. They're going to put their funnel-shaped webs close to the ground or in little crevices. Sometimes they might even be in the crevices around the outside of buildings. With this spider, it feels the vibration of the prey in the web, and then it's going to rush to grab it. And this is a very fast spider compared to other ones. This is going to move pretty quick. A lot of times we find these in our lawns and our forests, but again, you might see it, somewhere kind of outside of your home. Again, they're never going to really be ones to wander in the home. And then the grass spider, as I mentioned, is a type of funnel weaver that build their webs in the lawns and grassy fields. These are very beneficial, kind of like with our sheet weaving spiders, where they are going to eat a lot of our pests. Okay, a lot of our pests in our ag lands that it's like, we talk about, I mean, these are these are natural predators, okay? So you may not always have to use insecticides, right? Kind of around your crops. There are other types of insects that are actually eating some of your problems, right? So let's kind of give them space and let them do things naturally, if you will. So there's the next one are the nursery web spiders. I know it's like we have sheet weaving, we have purse web, we have orchard, we got all kinds of names for these spiders. The nursery web spiders, these are very large, hairy spiders. And these also get mistaken for wolf spiders, but they are not wolf spiders. Usually they're a little bit more slimmer than the wolf spider, which can be bigger and kind of thick. But it does have similar markings again that a lot of us look at that and we're like, oh, is that a wolf spider? But it's really not. And these are going to stay more outside. These are found more in our woods. They especially prefer to be near water, near streams and creeks is where you may come across them. The females are going to wrap their eggs in a silk egg sac. And this is one of the more unique spiders where it is going to actually carry this egg sac in her fangs, first of all, in her fangs, not on her body, actually in her mouth, if you will, until they hatch. And when it's time for them to hatch, like she knows when they're about ready to come out of the eggs, the female will then weave a few little leaves together with her silk and then put the eggs there. And it's going to be a little protective pocket for those little baby spiders, those little spiderlings. So that's where it gets the name nursery web spider, because it's almost like the female is kind of creating this little nursery for her children. So, it's very unique because when we think of the animal kingdom, we don't often think of insects very much handling much when it comes to their children, so to speak. But sometimes with spiders is you may see them care a little bit more for the eggs or the spiderlings. They're not just going to always drop, dispense their eggs and then move on. Okay. Some spiders will put a little bit more into it. So very interesting. Fishing spiders, as you can imagine, these are found kind of close to the water. So again, unless you live in you have a home in the woods or you live right near the water, a lot of times it's not going to be near you, but if you do live in a structure close, they could wander into the homes, but probably not. These are a little intimidating when you see them up close. These are a larger spider. They're very hairy. But again, primarily they're going to be out near these kind of river, creek beds, things like that. They're going to patrol for prey along the rocks and the pebbles. And sometimes they can even hold on to vegetation at the water's edge, kind of waiting for some prey to come along, okay? Most of the time during the day, they're found close to the ground, and then they will move kind of higher up on tree trunks at night. This is one spider where it is going to eat small animals. So we do have spiders capable of eating more than just insects. Fishing spiders are large enough that they can consume a frog even. So they will catch just about anything that they can get their hands on. And so that includes aquatic prey. Now, when it comes to can the spider swim? Can it be in the water long term? They can kind of partially put themselves in the water and stay under the water for a small period of time, but they can't do that long term without, of course, drowning. But if it's very shallow water or they're holding on to something, they may be able to catch some of those aquatic prey. Again, very rarely would they ever wander into a home unless your home is right in the woods by the river. I mean, they could bite. That bite may hurt a little bit, but just again, don't be handling these spiders just with your fingers, you know. Crab spiders. So I love crab spiders. They are so fun. And I'm sure some of you have probably accidentally come across a crab spider if you have cut flowers from your garden and brought them inside. Because sometimes they will hang out in the flowers. And what they're doing is they're waiting to kind of ambush their prey. They're kind of hiding in wait in the flowers and leaves of different plants to wait on their prey. So it's so funny when I just see like a little one come in on some of the flowers I bring indoors, and I'm like, "Oh, I'm sorry, little guy. It's like you're in the wrong spot here." So, and then I just like, you know, probably take that flower out and put him back outside. Um, but crab spiders also go by the name thomsids, which it's kind of based on their shape. They're very flat in shape. And what's interesting that you can kind of see with this top picture, they have two front pairs of legs that are really long, like super long compared to their back two pairs of legs. And this allows them to be more flexible with their movement. So they're able to walk forwards, backwards, and sideways. So they can really get around easy compared to other spiders. Something that we also like with crab spiders is they're usually very colorful. And sometimes they almost act as camouflage, where they could closely have the appearance of the color of the flower that they're on, which is why we may not notice them until they come into our homes with our flowers that they're actually there. But they can be anything from yellow and green and orange in color. Some of them may have some patterns, kind of more on their abdomen region. It could be a variation of kind of more of a gray or brown mottling or striping. Now, with these are what we call ambush predators. So they're lying in wait, right? They're not on a web, they're lying in wait for their prey to come along. So they're going to eat anything that's pretty well outside near the flowers. They're going to eat flies, they're going to eat mosquitoes, they're going to eat moths, and yes, they will eat bees. And before anyone freaks out about that, because I know it's like, we need to save the bees and we need to support the bees. Absolutely, we do. But these crab spiders have also adapted and lived in our ecosystem for many, many years, have grown and evolved with bees as well. And so it's again part of that food chain, part of that natural life cycle, okay? So even though these can eat bees, that doesn't mean we need to squash every crab spider that comes along. It needs to eat too. And most of the time, we're not going to have so many crab spiders around where it's going to, cause a decline in our bee population. Okay. We have many other things that are causing our bee populations to decline, like diseases and just habitat, fragmentation, things like that. So again, it's like, don't hate on crab spiders just because they could potentially eat a bee. Okay. Let's give them a chance too. But one thing I will note with that is these are very strong spiders, and whenever they are able to catch one of their victims, they can actually paralyze them. So as big as a bee is, they have the capacity to be able to paralyze that bee where it can no longer move. So it's quite interesting. Now, kind of with that paralysis, you would think, oh, this must have pretty potent venom, right? If it's able to paralyze something like a bee. And you would be right. This is one of the spiders that does have more potent venom than other spiders that we've talked about. Now, with that in mind, is that venom going to be concerning for us? Generally, not a problem, not generally dangerous. This spider is large enough that it can bite you, but again, don't handle it. And generally, even if it does, it's not concerning unless, as I stated before, you have a severe allergic reaction to spider bites as it is, okay? If you were to get bit by one and you know you have horrible reactions, then again, just seek a medical professional. But as for the rest of us, not anything to be too concerned with. I love these guys. Again, I find them so fun and kind of almost clownish, if you will, when I see them like in my garden. All right. If I had a favorite spider, I know everyone's like, what? You have a favorite spider? It would probably be a jumping spider. I find these to be a very fun spiders to just observe and watch. Okay. So these jumping spiders, whenever you kind of see them close up, they're very fuzzy. They're very fuzzy. They kind of have this big-eyed appearance. And that's the interesting with the spider's eyes, is it does have all 8 eyes, but the one pair is usually very large and directed forward, very similar to the forward-facing eyes that humans have. And as a result, it has one of the best eyesights of all the spiders that we've talked about. Okay. And so this is a spider where it does not rely on a web to catch prey. Okay. It is going to be able to kind of attack prey a lot easier, and it gets around really well. It uses kind of this silk line as it jumps. So it's using that silk line. You can kind of see it a little bit in that bottom picture to help with it jumping from place to place. You kind of think of the old-fashioned Spider-Man TV show, right? Or the Spider-Man movies is kind of what at least I envision with that. Because of this, these are excellent climbers, these are excellent jumpers, and they will move fast. Okay, it can be very hard to catch one of these, especially because it may wander into your home by accident. And that's usually where I see these, is occasionally one will just kind of hang out in my house or come through where maybe there was kind of a, between the door, kind of in my kitchen, we've got these little French doors, and there's always kind of this little crease, this little crevice that some of their insects are able to come through. And so sometimes I'll see jumping spiders kind of make their way in through that. But so with that in mind, you are going to see these more on man-made structures. You are going to see these on your homes, both inside and outside. Okay. They can bite if you're handling them, but they're not considered dangerous. And honestly, I'd be surprised if you can even handle one of these. They are so quick and so fast that, especially if I get one in my house, I struggle really hard to get it out of my house. And not because I don't want it there, because like I say, I think they're just the coolest little spiders, just watching their movements, but more that I want to get it kind of back outside, just to where it has more open space, if you will, and more diversity of food options. Um, but with these, they're going to eat. They can eat kind of some larger insects and other spiders, and they do that by pouncing on them. Again, because they're so agile. So they're going to eat things like flies and crickets. And so potentially if they're in their house, you might see them eat one of these in your home. So they could be beneficial in that regard. But again, you'll know it's a jumping spider if it's in your home just by watching its movement with how fast it is, how it's easily jumping from, parts of the wall to your cabinets, to your countertops. And again, it's nothing to be intimidated by. It's just a little spider that's kind of wandered around. But I don't know. I think they're so fun and I do find them quite cute and fuzzy. So again, I might be a little bit in the more of the minority by saying that spiders are cute, but I find a lot of like animals cute, even if they're not what we typically associate as warm and fuzzy. So talking about fuzzy, let's go to our wolf spiders. Okay, so this is one of the spiders that always intimidates people because they wander into our homes and they could be very large, and just with the size of it worries us like it's going to be really bad. And it's not. It's not. These can bite, but it's extremely rare. They're really only going to bite you if you're handling it, mishandling it, and it just feels threatened. So never pick it up by hand. Kind of try to herd it into a container if you can to get it out of your home. Um, but when we think of wolf spiders, there's a ton of different types here in Kentucky, and they're going to differ depending on the type of wolf spider, but generally they're kind of a mixture of black, gray, and brown. Sometimes they may even have some of that striping that we see on their different body parts. Now, what's interesting about wolf spiders is not just their size, it's with their reproduction. So when the females lay their eggs, they're going to carry these egg sacs on their abdomen, and they're going to carry it on their abdomen until the spiderlings hatch. I almost kind of think of it kind of like a mother kangaroo, although it's not a pouch per se, but the female is kind of carrying it kind of similar in that regard. And what's really fun and interesting is when these hatch, the spiderlings are going to live on mama. They're going to live on mama's back for several weeks until they are finally large enough to be able to hunt on their own. So they are basically piggybacking on mama for a long time. So mama's just, look, she's putting up with it. I mean, I give this female a lot of credit to have so many babies on their back, because I can have two toddlers basically, and boy, whew, they're a lot. So I can only imagine so many spider babies on this mama. Um, but anyway, with wolf spiders, these are definitely one of our more active hunters. They are going to patrol the ground and they are going to feed just about on anything from insects and other spiders. They are very fast moving despite their size. And kind of where they get the name wolf spider from is kind of like when we think of wolves out in the wild, they are able to stalk and chase their prey. That's kind of where it's getting that common name from, is its ability to stalk and chase prey, which may sound it may make people nervous, and maybe where you kind of get some of those, again, horror movies of the spiders that are stalking and chasing people, like, but I mean, it's really just a good adaptation, especially based on its size. Because again, this is a spider that's not utilizing any kind of webbing. It's not making a web. It literally is acting as a predator and trying to get a hold of its prey. These can be found everywhere. You're going to see these outside. You're going to see them in the woods. You can potentially see them in your homes. We see these sometimes, like they've been in our extension office that have wandered around. And again, people instantly see how big they are and they get freaked out by it. But again, they're not anything to be concerned with. They're not. They're not harmful. And again, just don't pick it up by your hands. Okay? Don't pick it up by your hands. get it on a sheet of paper or get it in a container and take it back outside. Don't squish it, please. A lot of people are just so like they see a spider and they instantly squish it with its shoes. And it's like, oh, guys, come on. It really wasn't being bad or being problematic. Again, we kind of got to get over that stigma a little bit and really try to appreciate our spider friends a little more, just in my opinion. All right, let's get to the last two spiders. And these are the ones I'm sure all of you have kind of been wanting to hear and listen about. And that's going to be our black widows and our brown recluses, kind of more of our venomous spiders that we're concerned about with their bites. So let's talk a little bit first about what the black widow spider is. So a black widow is actually a type of cobweb spider. So we had talked about cobweb spiders before, kind of at the beginning of the presentation. And these create kind of more of their kind of messy, disorganized webs. And a lot of times where these are located is generally going to be either under structures or under wood piles near stumps or stones. A lot of times you'll see these in the corners of your barns or your garage. I've seen these in greenhouses where people stack up all the plastic pots. So if you have a plastic pot pile, that tends to be a pretty nice environment for black widows to hang out in. So just kind of be mindful there, just saying. I've had them here in Kentucky in my own garage, hanging out. So they are around. They very much are around. There's different types of black widows. We have northern and southern black widows, but very similar when it comes to kind of body shape, size, coloration. So there is kind of differences between male and female spiders, not just based on size. The female black widows, of course, many of us know this, have kind of more of these rounder bodies. They're shiny and black, and they have bright red markings on them, even to the point where the one marking may look like a red hourglass. Now, males are completely different, and you may look at this and may not even realize it's a male black widow, honestly. Male black widows are not very similar to females. They have kind of more of a vibrant pattern on their abdomen, and it can be generally a lot of white spots, kind of intermittent with some orangey red spotting, if you will, that you'll see. Why it's called the black widow, a lot of you may already know this, but with some spider species, sometimes females will eat the males after they mate, okay? And that is the case with black widows. So most of the time, the male black widow is going to be killed and eaten by the female shortly after they are done mating. So that sounds really morbid and kind of disturbing, but that's just generally part of its life cycle. And if I'm being honest, the female's getting a good feed to prepare for her babies, to prepare for her eggs. So the male is definitely kind of acting as a martyr, if you will. Now, something I'll talk about when it comes to being concerned about this biting you. Okay, first off, let's start out with the basics. Male black widows and then our juvenile baby black widows generally do not have fangs that are large enough to bite you. They're not large enough to pierce skin. So you don't have to worry about that. If you see a lot of baby black widows around, say your garage, or if you do have a male black widow hanging out, generally it's not going to be a problem. It's not going to be able to bite you. So really, when it comes to bites, the bites are going to come from a female mature black widow, okay? And most of the time, these bites are going to occur during the summer months while the female is guarding over her eggs. So if you happen to invade her space where she is watching over and guarding her eggs, she may get a little aggressive and may bite you. Generally, any other time of the year, that's not the case. Okay. So this is where it's important to understand the life cycle of your spiders and know when they're going to be more common or around or when they're laying their eggs and things like that, because they may be a little bit more territorial, if you will. Okay. Now, what happens though if you get bit by a black widow? Okay. Again, I am not a medical professional. And so anytime you get a spider bite, especially if you're concerned you were bitten by a black widow, you should seek medical attention. But I can give you a couple, some information from what we tend to see when it comes to these spider bites. Okay. When you are bitten, most of the time the bite is painless. You may almost not even realize that you were bitten until a couple hours later. And that's usually a couple hours later when the pain may set in. Okay. Sometimes, just depending on how people react, whether they have reactions to spider bites or not, sometimes people may have no reaction whatsoever, or something that's so mild that it will go away on its own and doesn't need or require medical attention. But with that, on the flip side, if you know you've had issues with spider bites, you may have more symptoms than other people. Usually, unlike other spider bites, when it comes to black widows, there's generally not swelling around the bite, but sometimes you can see the little fang marks in your skin, and it's going to be followed by a little rash. Okay, so you may see a rash start to develop on that bite area. If you are sensitive to the black widows, generally you may see some other body symptoms a couple hours after you're bitten. It could be anything from nausea, chills, to having even a slight fever. You may have some muscle aches. In other rare occasions, you may even have some difficulty breathing. And again, that's where, again, you need to seek medical attention. For more healthy individuals, so, I'll say, like, if you're not immunocompromised, if you're not like a young child or, an elderly citizen, generally, you're going to have very little issue. A lot of times this bite and these problems are going to go away after a couple of days. Now, on some occasions, it may last as long as a week. But again, if it is something you are terribly concerned about and you've been bitten, then seek a medical professional. But I just kind of want to say we think the worst with these spider bites. And for, again, normal, healthy individuals, it may not even end up being an issue. So just kind of be mindful of that. It may not be as bad as it's always said when it comes to spider bites. Okay. So that's kind of generalized information on the black widow. So let's finish up with the brown recluse, okay? Because I know I'm getting towards the end of time, but this is a spider we all get, right? It's probably in most people's homes, okay? Let's kind of talk a little bit about what the spider is and where it's found and how bad the bite is, okay? These are relatively easy to identify. This is a long-legged spider. Usually it's often tan in color. And how you can distinguish it from other spiders is on its cephalothorax. It has this dark pattern that you can see in the bottom picture that resembles a violin or a fiddle. And you can see that outlined in yellow. This is kind of a thicker, bigger spider compared to, say, a cellar spider, because a lot of people will see a cellar spider and think it's a brown recluse when they're much their legs are much bigger and thinner and more spindly, whereas a brown recluse is again kind of more, its legs are definitely much thicker and not quite as long and kind of has more of a larger body to it. But even with these little guys, even though their size can range from the size of a little fingernail to a quarter, just depending on how big they get. A lot of times you can still kind of see the fiddle, even if it's quite small. Um, these do form webs. They're more messy and dense, and they're going to be closer to the ground or the floor. So you may not even notice these. These could be kind of, near your corners of your baseboards or like, kind of up. A lot of times they like to be in secluded, dark areas. It could be in a closet, could be up in your attic. If you have kind of a more warm, insulated basement, it could be there. Okay, but they will generally live in structures all year round. If you see one brown recluse in your house, there's probably multiple brown recluses. This is not to intimidate you. This is just where they are. They usually tend to hide during the day. If you see them out during the day, there could be a number of reasons for that. If you do a standard monthly pest control service where they spray around your home, a lot of times those insecticides may result in the spiders kind of coming out of their hiding. Also, if they're just like very hungry, if they're starving, they may search for food even during the daylight. But most of the time, they're not generally going to be out during the day, except in extreme cases. Or you may just kind of come across one just hiding in a dark cabinet, if I'm being honest with you. Many times I've opened a cabinet that I haven't been in for a while, and there may be a brown recluse hanging out in there. Generally, these are hunters, so they're going to hunt. They can eat larger insects, things like crickets, other spiders, and cockroaches even, especially if you have cockroach issues. But generally, again, they're doing more of that hunting at night. Now, it gets the name recluse for a reason. These are reclusive, and generally, they don't want to be around humans. Okay? They don't want to be around people. They like to hide. Okay? They're actually, in ways, a little bit more intimidated by humans. And so, if you come across one, it may run away from you. It may not want to be around you either. And so generally, you're probably not going to be touching this, at least not, on purpose. Where we find that people get bitten is usually if at night a brown recluse is searching for food. It could potentially wander into your shoes, into clothing, into your bed sheets, things like that. And if you move and the spider becomes trapped on you, it may bite you out of more out of concern, more because it is afraid. Okay. It's not biting you just to bite you. It's because it is trapped and it wants to get out. Okay. So generally, like I said, when we see people get bitten by brown recluse, it's because it's accidentally wandered into an area where you may be sleeping. Again, it's not anything to be nervous about. These are very rare. Okay. This is very rare. It's not going to happen, even if you have them in your house. What happens if you do get bitten? So let's talk about that a little bit. These do have potent venom. Now, their bites are rare, but they can cause potentially some serious wounds, especially if you, again, tend to have more allergic reactions or maybe you're more immunocompromised. Okay, so let's start out from the beginning. If you're bitten, more than likely you won't even know you got bit initially. A lot of times you can't feel it. Okay, you're going to notice it later. Where the bite is, will start to get red and swollen and tender. So that's kind of the difference between it versus a black widow. Again, the black widow bite does not get swollen. It's usually just a rash kind of in that area. But this area can swell and become tender. Now, most of the times it will stay localized to that one spot, and within a few weeks, it could usually heal itself without serious complications. Again, if you're a normal, healthy individual, no severe reactions. You may get bit, but you may not even potentially need medical intervention. Now, I will say, if you do know you got bit by a brown recluse or the spot starts to get worse, please seek medical attention, of course. So what happens is, worst case scenario, you're bitten and you're sensitive to the spider bite. What could happen? That bite will go beyond that redness and swelling. You may see this necrotic or brown lesion occurring. A lot of times it kind of sinks in and it's very irregular in shape, okay? It kind of will form this little central blister within it. So as the venom kind of continues into that tissue, this is where we get concerned, is that wound could expand over days or weeks. And that could almost become like this ulcer that persists, and eventually, if it's not taken care of, could leave a very deep scar. And then you've got a lot of, this sounds disgusting, dead flesh, like around that area. So certainly, if you see something like this, or if you're not aware you've gotten bitten, but the area where you did get bit worsens, again, get medical advice quickly so that you can take the proper medication and treatment to handle it. This is less common, but sometimes people can have more of a systemic reaction to the bite. So kind of similar to the black widow, it could cause things like chills or dizziness or fever or vomiting. So just be mindful of your symptoms. Again, especially if you're more elderly or if you have young children, you know, the bites from these spiders may be a little bit worse. So again, just be mindful of. But really, let me just kind of say the takeaway here, though, is spiders are not anything to get worked up. They're not anything to be afraid of, as much as our society and culture really heavily gives people arachnophobia. It's actually quite sad, because these animals are critical to our local ecosystems and generally are never going to harm people unless we are mishandling them. Okay. And I say that they are not going to harm you unless you are mishandling them. Okay. Where they feel like they are at risk or threatened. So just treat them with respect. Don't physically handle them if you don't have to. If they're in your house, you know, try to get them in a container and then move them back outside. Don't instantly squish them. Don't instantly like freak out. It's not worth it. Okay. Again, generally, these are spiders that are not going to be anything to worry about. So I can't stress that enough. I can't press that enough. And that's kind of one of the reasons I wanted to bring up spiders today, not just because, of course, with it being October and kind of the Halloween holiday, but certainly really just wanting to pass along, you know, important information about spiders, and hopefully in a way where this does not intimidate people or give people any kind of fear. Again, these really are good animals, and they are beneficial in many ways, more than we think. So that's kind of my soapbox for this. So thank you all so much for joining. I'm going to go ahead and stop